Yo, what up YouTube? Welcome to Hack ADHD and Dyslexia. My name is Nishantha. This channel is all about hacking our ADHD and dyslexia to take advantage of our most powerful gifts. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about how to hack your dyslexia to have a better memory system than normal people, alright? I'm going to show you guys about two techniques, and I'm kind of going to explain how memory works, and that way you can come up with your own systems and techniques to kind of hack your memory as well. Alright, before we get started though, I'm going to kind of share with you guys a story about like how I got to this place where like I had to think about, you know, memory and like learning in a different way. So when I'm not doing YouTube videos, I'm a 7th grade science teacher. I teach here in the Southern California area, and I've been teaching for about 4 years. Now when I first started teaching, you know, everyone around me, all the authorities, you know, all the people that, you know, was gurus or whatever were telling me I had to take notes and I had to give my students notes, and I had to force my students to take notes in a very specific way. And this method is called the Cornell Method, and it's really pushed by this organization called the Abbott organization. It's like the Abbott program or whatever. Well, when I was first starting, I was like, all right, I'll do it because everyone else is doing it. And but in the back of my head, I knew like this was not how I learned, and I had a feeling that this is not how my students would be learning either. But I pushed it anyway. So the Cornell Method kind of works like this. On one side of the paper, you write down key terms and definitions and main ideas, like in questions. And the other side of the paper, you fold the paper in half. On the other side of the paper, you like answer those questions. You write the definitions of those words, and you kind of explain the key ideas, all in basically in text, in paragraphs and things like that. And I did that for about 2 years, even though I knew for a fact that this wouldn't work, and the results kind of proved it, because my students had a really hard time remembering things. They had a really hard time coming up with the answers when I was giving them the quizzes and the tests and things like that. So they weren't actually learning what I was trying to teach them. What was actually happening was they were just transcribing, not translating the information. So they weren't actually thinking about what I was teaching them. They were just writing down all the things on the board, or they were just writing down all the words that came out of my mouth without actually thinking about what happened. Right? So about 2 years ago, I just changed up my whole game. I changed the way I delivered my content, and I changed the way I had my students take notes. And this completely changed how fast and how much information my students retained. And I want to share with you guys that technique and as well as another technique that I use personally that kind of hacks how our brain works and how our memory works. But before we do that, I gotta explain to you guys what memory is, how it works, and how we can hack it. Alright guys, so I'm going to explain how memory works to you guys in two different ways. The first way is the wrong way. This is how I used to teach my students. And the second way is the new method that I use to teach science to my students. This method is much more conducive to people learning better and remembering things much better. If you want to skip to the second part, just go to about 10 minutes into the video, fast forward, and you'll get to see that part. But I would kind of suggest that you see both ways of learning, because it'll help you see the contrast between the two different methods of learning and memorizing things. Alright, so I want to explain working memory to you guys as if you were one of my 7th grade science students, right? So if you want a high-level textbook definition or textbook explanation of what memory is, go read a textbook or go check out another YouTube video. This is not the right place for that. Alright? So memory can be broken down into two steps. The first step is storage. The second step is retrieval. So when you're storing memory, you take a piece of information that's not in your head already, in your mind already, and you put it. You're basically putting it into your mind. The second thing is you take that memory that's inside your head and you retrieve it whenever you need it. Like when you're taking a test, when you're studying, you're storing something. When you are trying to answer a question, you're retrieving that thing. That's how memory works. Now, memory can be broken down even further by long-term memory and short-term memory. Now, short-term memory is how information enters your brain. So whenever anything from the outside world comes into your head, it comes to your head through short-term memory, and sometimes it's through like the subconscious, but we're not gonna go through that right now. But let's just say that most of the memories that will be useful to you enters your mind through short-term memory. And short-term memory is also called working memory, and this working memory is what your brain uses to process information to figure out if it's important or not. If that information is important, it gets transferred to long-term memory. Now, short-term memory has a very short duration, and it also has duration is like how long memories can stay in short-term memory, and also like how much information can stay in short-term memory. Now, most people on average can hold about 7 pieces of information in short-term memory. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why, you know, our phone numbers are usually like 7 digits, right? And if you have ADHD, that number drops to about 5. And if you're like really prodigious at, like, if you have a really good memory, they say you can hold about 9 different things instead of 7, right? So, but most people on average hold about 7 pieces of information. All right, now that's kind of how short-term memory works. And a little tip that's a little tip that is useful to remember about short-term memory is, let's say you have 5 pieces. What you want to do is, when you're learning something or you're getting information from the outside world, you want to figure out ways to chunk them down into smaller but more detailed bits, right? If you have a concept it's like a new concept that you're learning, you can link parts of those concepts together so that when your brain remembers them, you hold them as a unit. That way you have other pieces of information that you can fill up these other 6 slots into. All right, so that's a pretty good tip. And as you do more of these, as you practice and you think about how memory works, you'll be able to get better at doing this. All right, now long-term memory is an entire different beast. So in long-term memory, there's like 2 sets of long-term memory. We have explicit long-term memory and implicit long-term memory. Now, explicit long-term memory are memories that you can consciously store and consciously recall. And whereas like implicit memory is memory that you cannot consciously store and you cannot consciously recall. The first of the explicit memories are what's called semantic memory. So semantic memories are just ideas. Those are the things that you would be trying to memorize for a test or trying to learn from a textbook, basically. Facts and ideas. So the second set of explicit memories is what's called autobiographical memories. Now, autobiographical memories are the things that happen to your life, right? So these are the type of memories, like, let's say that you meet a friend that you haven't seen for like 10 years, and you start talking, and you start remembering all the crazy things that you guys did when you guys were little kids, or like all the things that happened to this person or your family and their family, all the experiences that you had together, or all the experiences that you had with the other person would be an autobiographical memory. Right? So that's the second set. And the crazy thing about autobiographical memories, it's not very reliable. The third conscious or explicit type of memory is what's called episodic memory. Now, episodic memory is things that have a time frame. So this could be things that have a cause and an effect. So, you know, this happened first, and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's kind of like reading a story or like watching a Netflix series where, like, each episode, you know, like the order of the episode based on the events that occurred, right? And this is like, you know, maybe even following directions, like going from point A to point B would be like an episodic type of memory. If you're cooking something, or if you're doing a thing where time is involved, like if you're following a recipe, if you're baking a cake, or if you're, you know, running a maze, or doing something where you have to put events in order, you're doing things that are episodic. So that's like the third type of explicit memory type. All right, so let's jump into the second type, or the second system of long-term memory, which is implicit memory, which means that these memories are not consciously stored and not able to be consciously recalled, right? So you can't think of it and it'll just come to you. You have to do other things to kind of get it in. So the first type is called procedural memory. Now, you can think of procedural memory, it's kind of like episodic memory, but procedural memory kind of has to do with doing things. So like, I don't know if you guys driven like a stick shift car, but I learned how to drive with the stick shift, and for about a couple of days I was having a hard time like figuring out the clutch and then the gas and all this stuff, but then all of a sudden it just kind of clicked. After it clicked, it was easy. I don't even have to think. You just kind of go. It's the same thing with, you know, making a basketball shot, or like hitting a baseball, or doing tricks on a skateboard. All these different things is procedural. So once your body learns it, it just kind of learns it. Or even playing the piano, or like any kind of instrument. It's once your body learns how to do it, it just knows how to do it. So that's procedural memory. There's two more. Two more types, and we're not going to go too much deeply into it, but I'll just mention them real quick. There's what's called sense memory, which are things like all the smells, the tastes, the feelings of things. You can't consciously think about what an orange smells like, but once you smell it, you know what an orange is, right? And you can't really taste a steak until you're eating it. Then you recognize that you're eating a steak. So those are like sense memory. The third type of implicit memory is what's called priming, and priming is basically it's kind of how habits and addictions and things like that are triggered. So these type of memories are like linked to your senses. So if you smell a really good meal, your body will have a physiological reaction, and you'll like start salivating and getting ready to like digest that thing. Or if you smell something really bad, like something rotting, you'll like have like a reaction in your body where it'll feel kind of gross. Or if you hear someone like scratching a chalkboard, you'll have like a physiological like reaction to it. That's basically like that's priming memory. All right. So those are the two systems. I'm just gonna go real quick over it. So memory has to do with, you gotta store it and then retrieve it. There's long-term memory and short-term memory. Short-term memory is short. There's only a certain amount of information that you can store, and then it has to get shifted to long-term memory where it can stay there indefinitely forever. And long-term memory has two systems. The first system is implicit. The second system is explicit. So in the explicit system, these are things that you can consciously remember and consciously recall. And then the implicit system is things that you cannot implicitly, store and recall. All right. So that's kind of how it works. All right. So that was an old school way of learning and memorizing things. This is a new school way. All right. So when we think about memory, I want you guys to imagine a pirate. Think of any pirate. Captain Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, a pirate and memory kind of do the same job. So whenever a pirate goes out into the sea, they're trying to get some treasure from like a city or a different ship. They're gonna put that treasure into their ship and then take it to their pirate island and hide it somewhere. That's kind of how memory works. Let me explain. So whenever you get a new piece of information into your brain, that piece of information enters your brain through short-term memory, and it gets stored in short-term memory, just like a pirate's treasure gets stored in his or her ship, right? And the ship only has a certain amount of room to store the treasure, just like your short-term memory. In short-term memory, you can hold about 7 pieces of information in general, right? So 7 pieces of treasure. Now, if you were a smart pirate, what you would do is you would take all those different pieces of treasure, organize it in such a way that you can fit it into your 7 treasure boxes. Maybe organize those, gold would go in one, maybe weapons, maybe jewelry, secrets, magic, all these different things would go into different boxes. That way you can take more treasure back to your island, right? So that's kind of how short-term memory is related to being a pirate. So the next thing that's important about this short-term memory is that the ship can only make it to the island a few times a day, right? So the ship will come out here, it will grab some treasure, and it will take it back to the island like maybe 3 or 4 times a day. But this trip, once it makes it back, it empties out all the treasure, or sometimes if it doesn't get stored, it gets thrown away, and when it comes back, it's kind of like empty. It comes back into the sea without any treasure on it. All right, I hope that makes sense. All right, so our pirate ship is kind of like our short-term memory. And our pirate island, where we store all our treasure, is kind of like our long-term memory. Now, long-term memory has 2 parts. So an island has parts underneath the ocean and then parts above the ocean, right? The parts that you can see are parts of our long-term memory that we can control. We can actively store memories, and we can actively retrieve these memories. The parts underneath, and also this part of our memory system, long-term memory, is called explicit memory. Underneath the ocean, this part down here is called implicit memory. Now, these implicit memory types, we can't actively store information, and we cannot actively recall information from here either. So the things that we can control are memories about ideas and concepts. We can also control and think about it's called autobiographical memory. These are things that happen to us, and this type of memory is called episodic memory. These are like directions and things that involve time and things happening in a certain order. So underneath the island, we have what's called priming memory. So these are things that are like automatic reactions and addictions and things like that. Then we have sense memory. These are things like sight, which you can see, which you can smell, things that which you can taste. The third type of memory type is called procedural memory. These are types of memories that's kind of automatic. So if you learn how to hit a baseball or shoot a basketball, these type of memories will be stored subconsciously. You can't control storing these, and you can't control retrieving it. They automatically happen. So when we're trying to hack memory, we got to remember the two places where we can actually get in there and do something about it. So the first spot is at the memory storage, and the second spot is memory recall. When we're trying to memorize anything, when we're trying to learn anything, you want to use as many of these memory types as possible. So you want to encode when the treasure goes from the ship to the island. You want to put the treasure in many spots as possible on this island. Okay? So the more spots that you put this treasure in, the safer it'll be. So you're making copies all over the place. So the second place where we can hack our memory is at the memory retrieval stage. So whenever we want to find all of our treasure, the best way to do that is to build a treasure map, right? And in this treasure map, we want to leave clues where we can find our treasure, right? So the map that you build is kind of like what we just did on this blackboard here. You have visual information, and all these visual information is kind of linked to each other using arrows or images or concepts or even words that kind of take your brain from like, oh, okay, from here to here to here, and all the way to like your main idea or the main concept of the thing that you were trying to memorize. So this is actually the first method this is the method that I use to teach science to my students. And this is something that you guys can try too. So, get a piece of paper out whenever you're like watching a YouTube video or like at a lecture or something, draw it out, make pictures. So as you can see, there's not that many like letters or words on this map. It's mostly like graphical representations of ideas. And using this, it's kind of like following a map. So I can kind of follow along in this picture here and to kind of get to the final point, which is to make a graphical representation. So the second method that I use to memorize things a lot quicker is when I'm watching a lecture or listening to an audible. What I do is I get like a 500-piece puzzle or a 100-piece puzzle, and I throw on my headphones, and as I'm listening to the lecture or the audible, I'm making the puzzle. And what happens is you're building this picture as you progress through listening to the lecture. And what happens is when you go back and you look at the picture, it'll cue you in. It's kind of like a map of like where you were or what content you were listening to as you were like making it. So maybe a corner will be like the first half of a lecture, and then the top will be another half of the lecture, and the middle will be like a very specific content, and then the top left corner will be a very specific content, and the last corner will be like the conclusion. And by looking at the image, I can remember making the puzzle and listening to it. This is just another technique, and I think it's because I'm dyslexic and most of you guys are dyslexic too, and we are able to link these ideas with images, which is kind of rad actually. So I hope you guys enjoy that. I'll see you guys next time. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe, share with your friends if you think they'll enjoy it. Thanks again. If you have any comments, please leave them below. I'll be sure to answer those. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If this is your first time here, I'd love for you guys to subscribe. If you like this video, you can hit the like button to support the channel, and let me know your thoughts on the comment section. Thanks again. See you next time.